much for coming in this session. And I'm very pleased that today we have three amazing scientists here with us. And it will be very interesting to know about their path and how they, in the case of Leonora, wanted to have from Marie Curie Individual Fellowship to an ERC. In the case of Marta, a particular ERC in medieval history in such a niche area, and then from Anams, which she has been incredibly successful and have an ERC starting grant and then an ERC consolidator grant. So I will start with Anna then and would like to listen a bit about her career path, the impressive, amazing achievement that she has done, and if she has for us any tips or tricks for passing and having an ERC starting and then a consolidator grant.
Thank you. Okay, so just a little bit as a way of kind of giving a little bit of background. So I did my PhD at the University of Bristol. I did it under 3 years. Then I moved to University of Cambridge. There I did my postdoc for 4 years. I had 2 kids in the meantime, and then I decided to apply for. So in UK, so this is really related with the UK system. So in UK, you can either go to get a PA position by applying for lectureships, and so basically you are then employed by university, or you go and apply for individual fellowships, and I went through the fellowship route. So I applied for CERE UK, so that's a Cancer Research UK Career Development Fellowship, which gives you over £1 million funding for 6 years to start up the group. So this is what I actually started with, and that was in 2012, and with that I got the group leader position at the Department of Hematology, so I work on blood at the University of Cambridge. And then, so I started my group in one area of research, and then in 2015 I actually decided to apply for the ERC starting grant. So I guess I was already a group leader when I got the ERC starting grant, and that was really to move into a completely different area of research. So this was good about the ERC grants, is that they allow you to move into something that you maybe don't necessarily have background in, because it's a high risk, high gain type of funding. And then in 2021, when my ERC starting grant ended, I applied for the ERC consolidator, and I got that in 2022. In the meantime, I had 5 or 6 failures to get the national funding. So I think this is the important part, like in asking how you get the ERC starting grant and you get ERC consolidator, where you have a lot of practice and a lot of rejections in the meantime. But in general, I think the timing is important, because I think the idea is essential. And I think also these failures that I had, that helps you learn how to write the grant and how to sell your idea. And I guess we will later on talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to take all the time. But yeah, it's about the timing and applying it when your idea is mature, I would say.
Thank you. I am a medievalist, as previously said. I was trained mainly in Italy, but I then moved to other countries. So I got my PhD at the University of Milan, the State University of Milan, which is a big university, so I got lots of opportunities there. And then went to Cambridge for a year. Then didn't succeed in staying, as previously said, sent several proposals for postdocs, but didn't succeed. So got back to Italy and got other positions, then moved to France and got back to Italy again with the ERC starting grant. So I guess this tells you a bit about the kind of profile that helps accessing the ERC starting grant in such a particular field. In medieval history, it's particularly difficult to get the high risk, high gain part of the proposal. So I studied a bit of, I studied the field, all the projects that were funded in the past few years, and asked suggestions from several colleagues that didn't succeed, because in Italy nobody got an ERC grant, not in any step, like not even the Consolidation or advanced grant, even though they had very, very interesting and challenging projects. But I think the key part that they didn't get was that they were too theoretical. So I worked on that part of the project. I tried to focus on a specific and very clear object that evaluators could focus on, that every evaluator in the panel could understand what it was. I think the path that I just described, traveling to and fro from different countries, working in different research groups, helped me shape the idea of the project.
Thank you. So, yeah, my name is Eleonora, and I work in the field of nuclear fusion. I'm a physicist, so I represent the physical sciences and engineering panel. As Keti already mentioned, I had a Marie Curie fellowship. Before that, I did my PhD in Germany at the Max Planck Institute of Plasma Physics in Munich and the Ludwig Maximilian University. So my training was mostly based in Germany. With the Marie Curie, I moved then to Spain, and before getting the Marie Curie, I had another fellowship. I had a Eurofusion fellowship. The Eurofusion Consortium is basically, it's a European consortium just for nuclear physics. So nuclear fusion enters there. And that is actually a challenge because working in nuclear fusion, there are some restrictions to access Marie Curie grants and starting grants. So there you have to be not inventive, but you have to have an extra idea how you manage to combine nuclear fusion, but also with other fields, so that you can enter into these grant schemes. So yeah, with the Marie Curie, I moved to the University of Seville, and I'm there since 2016 now. And in 2018, sort of in the middle of the Marie Curie, I applied for the ERC starting grant. I basically counted the years, how many opportunities would I still have? And would I have another opportunity if I get a C now? And it said, yes, okay, I'm gonna try. And I also want to highlight that getting an ERC starting grant is not an individual person. I think in many fields, especially in my field, in physics, it's a lot about teamwork. I was not a group leader back then. I had maybe a small group with 2 students embedded in a bigger group, but it's really all about teamwork. The proposal, of course, you're the main writer and you're the main idea giver, but it was reviewed by many collaborators in my cases, and they helped me all to make it stronger. I also met up with ERC starting grantees at the University of Seville. There are not too many because it's very complicated to get one. In physics, I was the first one. And in nuclear fusion, in the whole nuclear fusion, I'm only the second one to get it because of these restrictions and in general because it's complicated. But so, yeah, I think the challenges are, as Anna already mentioned, you need time to write it. You need time for the idea also, that the idea gets mature. And then if you are working in a field where you are working in a team embedded with other collaborators, use also their knowledge. And many of us anyway apply several times, and I think with every failure, as Anna already mentioned, we learn. And so yeah, I think that is important.
Following what Leonora was saying, Anna, how important might be in the application the right institution, or how the institution can help you to nail correctly the project, maybe?
It's a tough one. So as far as I know, I mean, every institution wants to have as many ERC awardees as possible, and so as far as I know, many of them are organizing different courses and yeah, to help you do that. I'm not sure how much that meant to me, like how much, because I think now even online, if you type ERC, like you will find YouTube videos like with advice how to do that and so on. But I think the bottom line is, I mean, at least me, because, okay, so obviously I've been doing the PI job and applying for many things for many, many years. And I have been reviewing other people's work and so on. And I think for the ERC, the trap is this kind of, I think for other people, high gain, high risk, where they think that a high risk means they need to write science fiction. It's not that. It really needs to be a kind of feasible project. So balancing between being creative and innovative, a novel idea, but really being feasible. Because I think at the end of the day, ERC wants actually low risk, high gain, rather than high risk. You know, what's the point of finding something that kind of is going to fail? So I think that's why I was saying the timing, like in terms of maturing the idea, so that you can actually hit this kind of fine line when something is cutting edge. So it's new and novel, but it's feasible, and you can actually demonstrate that you can do that. And no matter how many courses you go on, which are telling you how to write and so on, no one can tell you that. And you know, you can talk with other PIs and consult with them and so on. But you know, at the end of the day, it's your idea. So.
Thank you. So Marta, your idea, how did you come up with that idea to write?
Well, first of all, just for you to understand the topic, my project is on the so-called, well, I decided to call them this way, democracies of the Alps. So I'm going to study, because I haven't started yet, the Western Alps, both on both sides, in the late medieval period, through local records. So political practices and the ways in which local communities organize themselves. So the idea, which is the basic thing of the ERC, they usually tell you this kind of things, emerged from working on previous projects and basically coming across incredibly rich archives that nobody had studied. So lots of historians didn't even know they existed, because they were in very remote places in the Alps, or very, very difficult to read and badly preserved, so nobody even attempted to open the records. So the idea was, on the one hand, I want to study this, and there's no way to do this on my own. So what can I do? I'm going to apply for an ERC starting grant in order to have a large team and pursue this project. On the other hand, the point is, the idea must be, in order to get funding, must be, as we said, high risk, high gain, in the sense that it must be very, very innovative, groundbreaking. So I tried to look at the projects in the perspective of the evaluators. Why should we give this person all this money, which is a lot? And I thought, why is this important? And it is important because it's also related to actual problems, very urgent problems related to political debates on supposedly marginal areas in Europe. So my point in the project was stressing the importance of this area as a sort of model in order to understand how politics worked and might also work nowadays in places which are very far from the usually privileged decision-making centers. So this was the idea that I think helped me get the grant in the perspective of the evaluators.
Leonora, how important, according to you, has been being already a Marie Curie individual fellow in the evaluation of ERC starting grant?
I think it certainly helps. It certainly helped to get a positive outcome, but I don't think it's the only thing. I think it's really the mix of the CV of the principal investigator, the achievements, the early track achievements, and so yeah, I think all details count. Your publications, your conferences, invited talks, any awards, any previous fellowships if you had, but also if you don't have. I think highlighting that you can show that you're at the stage that you can lead a group is important. So for example, supervising students, bachelor students, master students, or PhD students if you have already. I think all these small details count. In my case, I've looked up the slides for the interview that I prepared in 2018. And so at the interview stage, I could put, of course, that I was a Marie Curie fellow, but in that year was also the year where I started to get the first award. So I was like in the second round, and for the application, I didn't put it in because you don't put in I have applied for this, but I don't know if I got it. But for the interview stage, I was selected as one of 3 finalists, so that was an extra that I could put. The high risk, high gain is also very important. I didn't put it in my ERC starting grant, this famous table where one should show what is the high gain, high risk, or maybe better low, medium risk. I did not do that. Even though at our university we have also we have an ERC office where they help you to review, of course, from a different angle. Yeah. But there was just too little time. And yeah, I put that all at the interview stage, for example. So yes, I think.
And a last question from my side, and then I will let you guys ask whatever you will wish. How long in advance did you start to prepare the project, and how different it was from whatever your research was already ongoing?
Okay, so first the second bit. So how different? It had to be very, very different. So because I already got it, as I said, for the ERC starting grant, I had before that Cvejic Career Development Fellowship, which was for 6 years. So it had to be very clear that this has nothing to do with the first one. So literally there was no overlap, and I think in the application form, if people kind of went through that, you're actually asked about the current funding that you have or any other funding that you're applying for. So you have to be kind of super careful about that. How much in advance? I'm a little bit maybe extreme in that case. I prepare a lot in advance. A lot. You know, they tell you like 6 months. I'm probably one of those that start a year in advance by just thinking about things and then kind of trying to shape the idea or concept first. And then I go into the writing, and then I probably have 10 different versions that is kind of writing, deleting, and so on. And then I probably send 3 months in advance to other people to look at that, because there is no point in sending to other people to review your application if you're not going to actually change it. So probably before a month before a deadline, I have finished applications. I'm not one of those people stressing out about the deadline. But I don't think that I'm a kind of normal or a regular one there.
Apparently successful.
Yeah, but no, I think it really is. Sometimes, you know, you hear this, especially for the starting grant, when you talk with other postdocs and then try to brag how they wrote the application in a month. I mean, that's nonsense, I think. You know, it's a serious job, right? So you have to take it seriously, and it's a serious science, and you have to take your science seriously. So you invest time in that, and writing is art, right? So you don't get it right first time. You have to you have to revise, and get as much help from other people that you can. Yeah. So that's the.
Wait, 1 year is good. What about you, Marta?
Well, I first started thinking about applying for an ERC starting grant before getting to those archives. So a couple of years earlier than the actual deadline, then didn't really get to the stage when I had a good idea I was really convinced about. So just left the project there. And then while working, as I said, on another postdoctoral fellowship, during another postdoctoral fellowship, working on another project, I sort of had the idea and started writing sort of drafts, discussing these drafts with people, with colleagues, even with PhD students, lots of people that could provide me with different perspectives. I would say a few months earlier than the actual deadline. But as I said, a lot of work, a lot of preliminary research was done previously. So I already had all the literature, all the pilot studies that are very important to sort of prove that you know what you're doing, that you know that that's feasible, that you have the material in hand. So I would say in the last 6 months, actually, on and off, because it's very difficult to find the time to do this full time. So you're teaching, you're doing other research, you're supervising students or whatever. So on and off, and then I rushed, unfortunately, in the last month. But that was really helpful because it was the Christmas holidays. So I sacrificed the Christmas holidays. I wouldn't suggest waiting for the last moment because that was a very special round. They changed the deadline only that year. So don't take this as a suggestion.
Yeah, in my case, I would say it was maybe similar to Marta. As I mentioned before, so the proposal idea, maybe it was, around 6 months before the deadline. I wasn't, as I told you before, I wasn't really planning on, because I had my Marie Curie fellowship, and during this fellowship, there were new results, and we did some feasibility studies for some kind of diagnostics that then entered into the ERC starting grant. So the idea was born early, I would say, but without having in mind, oh, I'm going to apply later this year for the ERC starting grant. No, because I thought, well, Marie Curie, and then let's see what happens later. But then I started to look into the details of the starting grant, and I saw, okay, 2 to 7 years after the PhD, if I try next year and I fail, I'm not sure I can apply again. So my thinking was, I'm going to fail this year. I will not be able to apply for 1 year, because if you get a B or a C in step 1, then you have to make a break. You can't apply directly in the next year. And I was thinking, okay, I will not get it, and then I have another chance in 2 years. That was my thinking. I was lucky that I got it in the end, but that was my thinking, because I thought, if I don't try it now, then I will not know. So if you don't try, you will not know if it's a yes or no. Yeah, if you don't try, it's a no anyway. So yeah, that was particular, maybe a bit in my case. And then also in the holidays, in my case, it was August. I decided, okay, we were going to do it. The deadline was in October. So it was, maybe 3 months before the 2 to 3 months before the deadline. I took my summer vacations to write it, to get a full draft complete of both parts. It's 20 pages in the end. And then I also rushed. Unfortunately, I don't recommend that. I was maybe not the extreme opposite case to Anna, because I didn't take only just 1 month, but I had the 3 month. But I remember that I submitted on the day when the portal closed, and I was traveling from Seville to Munich to do some experiments. Yes, I don't recommend that. I submitted on the day when, at the airport actually. So yes, I stayed in the airport of Munich because I didn't want my colleagues at the Max Planck to see me rushing. So I said, okay, I will try to do it here. And I mean, I managed, but yeah, take your time. That's what I can recommend. For the now also for the submission, I mean, also for the submission. So take the time for the submission. Check out the portal way in advance. This I did, of course, but then uploading the files. There is also the option that you submit and then re-upload a new version. This is also what I did, but the final version I submitted on the last day. Yes.
Well done, the three of you. Guys, anyone has questions?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for sharing your experiences. I wanted to ask maybe all of you if you could share how important was the composition of the group, like of the team members? How many were PhDs? How many were postdocs? And was there a specific reason why? Thank you.
No, it's not. Is it? Okay. So, well, yes and no. Because in my case, and so I was based in UK at the time, and so the budget had to be made like for obviously UK. I had to pay my salary from like 100%. So that, you know, Cambridge is, if you can't sustain yourself, you're out. So that leaves a little money for anything else. And so I didn't. I don't think actually in either of those I proposed to have PhD students. So I only had postdocs. And in the first starting round, like the first one, which is a starting round, because I was proposing to move into something that I had zero expertise in, I had to have a postdoc because it wouldn't be realistic really to have a PhD to supervise someone about something that you don't know anything about. Like that would be suicide. So I would say I don't think you need to be kind of too strategic. Just be kind of rational about things. I need to do this. Who is the best person to hire to help me that? If it is something that you are really comfortable with and you can train people, then go that way. If it is something that is new and you need someone, you need to bring in expertise in your lab, you obviously want to have a postdoc. So that would be kind of my way. Just kind of think, you know, I got it, what do I need to do and who I need for that?
In my case, that was a very difficult part because, as you can imagine, the historian is a very solitary work, usually. So it's not that common to have large research teams. So I actually tried to look at my project from an interdisciplinary perspective because I put in various disciplines. And I decided to have one postdoc for each, at least. In the end, I ended up with 5 postdocs and 2 PhD students, but I'm only paying for part of my salary. So this is very important to be taken into consideration. You really need to take into account what your potential institution wants you to pay for with the grant, and also all the restrictions related to the country you're going to work in. So in my case, there are some boundaries in terms of the kind of contracts you can have, how much they will cost. So you need to study that a bit before allocating the resources. But first of all, as Anna said, I decided to have one specialist for each area of expertise.
Yeah, so in my case, I had 3 research lines in the project, and one of them was a completely new field for me, like for Anna. So I connected my project to astrophysics, and then I had to show somehow, since I'm not trained in astrophysics, how do I make this project successful? So I put one postdoc on that research line. Altogether, I have put myself 2 postdocs, 3 PhD students, and I had also hired an administrative support, which I think is super important that you include it, part-time, full-time, whatever you think is best. But I think it's important that there is someone that helps you getting the project started, especially in a field like in physics or engineering, where in your project you also buy hardware. It's a major headache to get these things done if you're on your own. I was on my own in the first year without an admin support. I got help, of course, from the university, but it's always good to have a person dedicated to your project. So I would recommend that. And apart from that, I had also one technical support for 1 year. So these are the details of my.
Hi, thank you really for sharing your wonderful experiences. I've heard several versions on how ERCs can be used or shouldn't be used to build lab capacity. What's your view on that from your experience or other cases?
I'm not sure that I understand. What do you mean by lab capacity? Like equipment. Right. Yeah. Yeah, so I think in my case, I always tried to go for this extra, never succeeded. So it didn't work well for me. So basically, usually what they wanted, in my case, to see is that all the equipment is there. So the work that I do is related with single cell technology, so there's a lot of sequencing. So in that sense, a lot of money actually in my projects go on just sequencing DNA, RNA, and so on. So I don't have actually much money like for staff. I mean, I had 1 or 2 people top on the on my grants, and then really minimal equipment. But I never use the ERC grants as the only source of money for my research. So I always had other ones as well, yeah. Because, yeah, I mean, otherwise my group would be very small. And so I'm always impressed when I hear that someone can get 5 people, like, wow, like, for the ERC grant, and I get a 1. Yeah.
Well, the big difference is that I don't have a lot of equipment, of course, but I need lots of brains. So that's the difference in the fields. One thing I am introducing in my university, in my department, that we do not currently have, is an expert in digital humanities, which is something that's becoming more and more essential in our fields. So we don't have anyone capable of actually doing that. I have one person in mind. I want to hire this person, so the ERC enables me to do that, because the ERC enables me to offer a proper salary for people who need to move from one country to another, something that Italian ministry salaries cannot do. But I don't have equipment, very costly stuff.
So I do have equipment, and I also put it in the starting round. It shouldn't be, the recommendation was, that I heard from many others, that it shouldn't be like dominant, that the ERC is also to build up your team or consolidate your team. I also went for the extra, and I got a little bit of extra, so it's a bit more than the 1.5 million. It was reduced, but I got a little bit of the extra. So in total, I think maybe 300,000 were for hardware, and the rest was to build up the team and also other extra indirect costs, etc. But yeah, I have the same also. I am not only working in civil, I'm working with other large facilities, so I'm moving around. The whole team is moving around, so I put an extra for travel. I put an extra, since I'm collaborating with them, I don't need to pay the other institutions, which is maybe different in other fields. But I did put, the equipment that was necessary to make this project a success. And this they have granted. So what they, what the panel has recommended is, I think, to reduce in the end from 3 PhDs to 1 PhD student. In the end, it worked out that I could have all the 3 PhD students. So that was fine. But in principle, I think it is important that for the project that you propose, that you put everything that you need. Then you have to look, of course, for the budget. And the extra you can ask, you just have to justify it. And then depending on the panel and the decision they will take, it will go through, or they will just reduce it. In my case, it was reduced. That was also fine.
Hi. Did you read previously awarded ERC project applications, but like whole or just abstracts, and where did you get them? How much did it affect, or how much did it help you?
Anyone in particular, or to everyone?
Okay, so I did not have available any other ERC starting grant projects. I have read some abstracts. In my field, it was a little bit complicated because there was only one successful. So, and I knew that person. So I talked to him, yes. But I looked at, in general, I applied in PE2, which is, like the basic physics program. And it's like, it's so wide, it's so spread in that field. So I started to read also other projects, to read abstracts of those that were awarded. And I read also the composition of the panels. I tried to look up the background of the panel members. In my particular case, it didn't help to write the project, but I was trying to take into account, okay, these panel members are from this field. How can I prepare for the possible questions that they could have when they read my project? That's how I try to include it.
I read several abstracts. My panel is SH6, so it's a wide panel on historical studies, from archaeology to modern studies. So I mainly focused on the abstracts in medieval history, and that's why I realized all the funded projects had something very, very clear at the core of the project. And then I had the opportunity to read 3 funded projects, not in medieval history, in other fields, from colleagues that got the grant and were so kind to share it with me. That's not very, very common, I can tell you. And realized how they tried to explain things in order to meet the different expertise in the panel, because especially at the first step, you're going to be read by not necessarily specialists from your specific field. And then what helped me quite a lot was reading the projects of non-funded colleagues and try to understand what was not wrong, but what didn't get them to the final part, and focus on not doing that. But also abstracts are very helpful.
No, I didn't read any of it. I think it's not healthy. You should be focusing on yourself and your science rather than looking outwards what other people are doing and kind of getting depressed if they have more publications, better idea. So I think that, in my opinion, reading other people's work, other people's applications actually makes sense only if you want to understand the structure of the application. Meaning that, as I said, there are rules around how you write it. That's why I said it was art. So you basically have to learn how to write application, and that, you know, reading other people's applications, successful ones, it makes sense, and there are some things that one should apply. The other thing, so I read from one person that got at that time a consolidator grant. So I read her, so the person got the consolidator grant ERC, but I read her starting grant, which was like 5 years old or something like that, with the idea to see what was the cutting edge, and that didn't help, right? Because that was, at the time when I was reading it, you know, there was nothing novel about it. I thought, well, why would this be funded, right? But that was like 5 years ago. So maybe it makes sense if you know someone in the field, just to get a sense how this cutting edge looks like. But if you don't, then it doesn't really help. And reading other kind of something that you're not very, very familiar with, I don't really, I don't see the point there. But I think if you have someone, some applications which are well written, then to understand the rules, then I think that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentations. It was very interesting. I'm just curious, what is the importance of this interdisciplinary aspect? The question is for all three of you, since you come from different fields. Thank you.
Thanks. Shall I start?
Okay, so I don't know if you're meaning like multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary. Mine was not interdisciplinary, but it's kind of multidisciplinary in a sense that the things that I work on involves blood for, let's say, collected from patients. So there is this aspect, but also sequencing, which means bioinformatics, computational biology, machine learning, and things like that. But these are the disciplines which are kind of commonly combined by other people. So in that sense, the novelty was not there. The novelty in my proposals comes from the concept, right? And in ERC starting grant, it was really the idea, in this case, like to look at the blood not as, I don't know, stepwise process, but continuous process. And in the consolidator grant was again using the existing technologies. They're all cutting edge, like in a sense, but to kind of challenge the concept. So it is actually just the idea around which you do everything else. But I'm sure that, you know, there are people who are actually developing new technologies, maybe, but mine was not like that.
In my case, I attempted to be more interdisciplinary because usually proposals in history, and especially medieval history, tend to be a bit traditional. So in order to avoid doing that, I tried to insist on the combination of different disciplines that in my case are medieval history, which is the core of the project, digital humanities, which does not serve the purpose of enabling other people to do something easy in the easiest way, but is used in the project in order to reshape the way you interrogate historical records. So it really is a big part of the project. And then I am also hiring 2 experts in archival science and a specific discipline which is not internationally recognized, I found out, which is diplomatics studies, which is the studies of how records were written in the past. Because, of course, that tells you quite a lot of how people thought. And in Italy, that's a very big discipline. So I'm going to put these people together, and they're going to work on a online platform that we are going to build. So we are building the infrastructure to collect and interrogate data all together, no matter where we are working. So this should enable the team to work collaboratively, which is not usually the case for historians. They tend to share experiences once they finish their research.
Yeah, so, sorry, I can't see. It's okay. So in my case, Yeah, I combined nuclear fusion with astrophysics, simply to have the opportunity to be able to apply at all. And it was very easy because the idea was to study particle transport and particle acceleration in this case in a plasma, and then apply the models that we develop to observations that we see in solar flares in this case. Yeah. So at some point it became really obvious, and I got really excited about about this. And I think it's important, maybe in some fields, but as Anna also mentioned, it's not necessarily that in every single project it has to be mentioned. I think it's important that you are excited about the interdisciplinarity. Yeah.
Yes, I have a question for Anna, because you mentioned that your ERC starting grant cover your own salary. So let's say you got this ERC, and then I assume that you will apply for some 10-year track position where the university will cover, let's say, 50% of your salary. So is it possible that during the implementation you can convert your salary to hire another postdoc?
Yeah, they didn't. But hypothetically, I think that you have, there is a chance to, I mean, for sure there is a chance, for example, for the ERC Consolidator grant, again, I've put 100% salary, and they were not happy with that. And it was very clear at the interview that they were not very happy about that, because again, I'm not putting sufficient number of people then on the grant. And they were kind of questioning, you know, I'm doing cutting edge with 1.5 postdocs. I mean, how can that be, right? So then I had to then, I changed. I'm now at the University of Copenhagen, so I actually changed the institution and everything, and then transferred my grant, and then the picture completely changed. And they were happy for me to do rebudgeting at that stage. So usually my experience is that if you are negotiating something, you negotiate it before the start of the ERC grant, and they're very happy to accommodate these changes if the reason for changes are such that will improve, you know, your probability of being successful in achieving your aims. I'm not sure if you can do that midway, but I think that they're usually reasonable, and you know, if it serves the purpose to improve your science, I think they're usually willing to help.
Thank you. Any other question? We have time just for the last one. No? Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thanks for the nice discussion. It's very inspiring. I was wondering how important is to include collaborators in your proposals, or keep in mind these collaborations. Is it important that they are from the same institutions than you, or it's better if you have external ones from other institutions, or even internationals, nationals?
Yeah, I think one needs to be careful with collaborators. Like, so these are individual fellowships. So you are really meant to be doing all the things on your own, and it's okay to collaborate as long as it's clear that this is more of a guidance rather than your, the success of your project depends on these other people. I don't think it matters that in that sense where they're from. So for example, for my ERC Consolidator, I was applying through University of Cambridge, and one of my collaborators was in UK, but not at the University of Cambridge, it was at the Sanger Institute, and the other collaborator was in Germany. But as I said, these collaborators were not essential for the success of my project. They're more there to provide guidance in terms of if I need this additional expertise, they will be kind of open to work with me, so to say. So I think it's not as some of these maybe collaborative projects where really you have to find a collaborator, and unless they do something, you're kind of doomed. no, it needs to be your project, and these people are just there to facilitate, kind of, or guide, let's say, your research.
Yeah, I totally agree with this, especially at the starting grant level. I was suggested by several people not to insist on the presence of collaborators because you are supposed to be the PI, the one making decisions, the one that knows how to handle the project. So I decided, in order to introduce anyway sort of guidance in terms of suggestions, sharing experiences, I added an advisory board from with people from lots of institutions in Europe, people I have worked in the past with. I didn't put anyone from my institution because I was suggested not to do that, in order not to look like I am applying for this because I am entitled as a young researcher, but the idea is not mine. This might be, maybe that's not the case, that the evaluators don't think that, but you never know. Depends on the field, depends whether they know the people that you're mentioning or not. And anyway, you are the one who is in charge. So collaborators, at least in the ERC starting grant, should not be that important.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the research field. In the starting grants, you have to show that you're the leader of your project and your idea. But if you work with large research infrastructures, you have to kind of show that you are collaborating with them already, because if you do your experiments at CERN and you're not already working with them, why would a panel think that you will be able to carry out this project if you have never been there? So I think it really depends on the field. The collaborations to mention, in my case, for example, I didn't put, because I think you can put senior research members as team members. This I haven't done, but I did list collaborations with large research infrastructures, simply because I am doing the experiments there, and in this case it was Germany, and my contingency, Germany and the UK, and my contingency plan was if these two machines fail, I'm going to go to the US. So that, but again, it really depends. So I think, yeah, I agree with Marta and Anna on including senior research members. I would maybe tend not to do that, but I have heard from other applicants that they have done that, and I think part of them were also successful. So I think, yeah, it depends a lot on the field.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much because you are here on a Saturday and accepted our invitation. And I hope that we got some new tips and tricks, and we will be all the people here successful for the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.